want to make sure that people understand that there is no magic bullet here. There's no cure for Alzheimer's disease at present. The drug that I'm taking, Leqembi, helps to slow the progress of this disease in its early stages. It is also of no value to people, sadly, in the middle or later stages of living with Alzheimer's. I also want to express that I feel extremely fortunate and privileged to be able to take this drug. First of all, it's only available in the United States and Japan at the moment. But the US and Japan are the only places where you can actually get this medication. Hi, this is George King, back with Dancing with Delirium, my blog account of living with Alzheimer's. So, a recent article in the Wall Street Journal suggested that advances in medical research are propelling a shift from inevitable decline to managed living. And this, of course, is very encouraging to those of us living with Alzheimer's. But why did it take 117 years from the initial diagnosis of this disease to get to this point? You may remember in an earlier post that I talked about how Alois Alzheimer, a German doctor, originally diagnosed Alzheimer's disease in 1907. So Dr. Alzheimer was part of an informal group of German neurologists and psychiatrists, researchers and scientists at the time, that were actually fascinated in the idea that mental health problems were actually caused by organic diseases in the brain and not various other ideas that have been floating around since the Middle Ages. Alzheimer described his discovery in a female patient as an unusual disease of the cerebral cortex. So why have we not found a cure for this disease first diagnosed in 1907? Well, according to Dr. Jason Karlawish in his 2021 book, The Problem of Alzheimer's, the answer is, and I'm going to refer to my notes here, a tangled knot of social, cultural, and political events that transformed a rare disease into the crisis we face today. So I interviewed Dr. Karlawish a couple of weeks back, and we're going to include excerpts from that interview in some of the posts over the next few months. But for now, here's my abbreviated answer. The process begins with the collapse of German society in the first half of the 21st century, occasioned by 2 world wars, anti-Semitism, and fascism. The previous hotbed of neurological research faded as all resources disappeared into the war effort. As the world re-emerged into relative stability and peace in the late 1940s, nuclear research and Freudian psychiatry captured the imagination, interest, and all available resources for research and development, while neurology languished. It would be 1976, nearly 70 years after Dr. Alzheimer's discovery, that Robert Katzman, a neurologist, characterized Alzheimer's as a serious and life-threatening disease. Dr. Katzman's paper argued that Alzheimer's disease and senile dementia were actually one and the same. Senility was no longer an inevitability of aging, but a diagnosable disease with the possibilities of a cure. So, this is George King signing off for another week, and keep dancing. So when I first conceived this blog, I thought that perhaps its greatest value might be as a record of the experiences of somebody living with and potentially dying with Alzheimer's disease, and revealing the changes on that journey as I go through them. But here we are, sort of 6 months in, so to speak, and I realize that nothing has really changed of any great significance until last week. So I'm switching horses from continuing to talk about the history of Alzheimer's, its development, particularly in the 21st century, and we're going to go somewhere else. And an interesting wrinkle this week. I got a phone call from the nurse who administers the drug that I'm taking. It's called Leqembi, which ostensibly arrests the progress of this neurological disease. It slows the progress, I should say. So I'm taking this drug Leqembi, and the nurse calls up and says, "Oh, the neurologist, who I won't name here, I'm not quite sure why, but the neurologist said he wasn't going to treat you anymore because you're taking these blood thinners." And I was sort of gobsmacked because, number one, why isn't he having this conversation with me? Why is his nurse basically telling me he's dumping me? And secondly, this is something that's potentially life-saving for me, or certainly life-altering. And to suddenly, out of the blue, just pull the trigger and sort of throw me out into the wilderness, so to speak, seems extremely unethical, something which I'm sure we will discuss. I called to make an appointment to talk to him about this and found out, gee, he's on vacation. So I'm sort of stunned by this news because obviously it could affect me in substantial ways. But now I can't really do anything till he gets back and I get a chance to talk to him and sort of assess what's possible. What's particularly grievous to me is the fact that he's known ever since I started visiting his practice, before we even diagnosed this disease, he knew exactly what sort of medications I was on, including the drug thinners. So I'm sort of at a loss. Okay, just reporting in. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that's where things stand. I have a televisit scheduled with the neurologist next Tuesday, so check back and see what happens next week. In the meantime, I have a feeling I will be sitting out the next dance. Let me know what you think. I'm concerned about this.